In a packed Sydney courtroom, Justice Ian Harrison delivered his verdict.
Christopher Michael Dawson, on the charge that on or about 8 January 1982 at Bayview or elsewhere in the state of New South Wales, you did murder Lynette Dawson. I find you guilty.
He said Dawson had been motivated by an obsessive desire to be in a relationship with the family babysitter.
To maintain that Lynette Dawson might possibly have abandoned everything that she knew is to substitute what is reasonably possible with frail speculation. To paraphrase the Crown's submission, the proposition is ludicrous.
It was a day of vindication for Lynette's family, who have waited more than 4 decades for answers.
She loved her family and never left them of her own accord. Instead, her trust was betrayed by a man she loved.
Standing beside them, Hedley Thomas, whose podcast, The Teacher's Pet, catapulted the case into the public consciousness.
He has had 40 years of his life that he has been able to enjoy without any accountability for what's happened. That's disgraceful.
Witnesses came forward to Hedley that wouldn't come forward to the police. I'm sure that made such a massive difference to this whole case.
Justice Harrison spent the bulk of his 5.5-hour judgment pulling apart defence arguments. The wholly circumstantial case set a high bar for conviction, but ultimately he found murder to be the only rational explanation. As his final verdict was read out, the courtroom erupted into applause. Outside the court, his twin brother was visibly frustrated, and his lawyer flagged an appeal.
It's probable that, of course, he will appeal against his conviction. Mr Dawson has always asserted, and he still does, his absolute innocence.
Dawson is in custody, awaiting a sentencing date. Ruby Cornish, ABC News, Sydney.
For more now, let's bring in court reporter Jamelle Wells. Jamelle, it's been an extraordinary case all the way through to Judgment Day.
There's been so much public interest in this case over the years, Juanita, that a second public gallery had to be opened up at the court today. And Chris Dawson had argued that because of all this interest, he would never get a fair trial before a jury, so he stood trial judge alone. Now, part of that interest has been generated by the podcast The Teacher's Pet, but the judge today said he put that aside and all the media hype surrounding the case aside when he arrived at his decision. In the courtroom, Chris Dawson showed little emotion when the verdict was read out, but you could clearly hear the handcuffs being put on him and closed as a group of court officers took him away. A sentencing date for him has yet to be confirmed.
Jamelle Wells reporting there. The Teacher's Pet podcast that reignited so much interest in the case attracted millions of listeners around the world. They were intrigued by one key question: why would a loving mother walk out on her children never to be seen again?
7 years before she vanished, Lynette Dawson appeared to be living a picture-perfect life, a mother of 2 daughters cheekily mistaking her footballer and high school teacher husband, Chris Dawson, for his twin brother, Paul.
I get into trouble because I swear that Paul put his arms around me and Paul denied it. No, never.
Her 1982 disappearance from her Bayview home in the Northern Beaches cascaded into one of Sydney's biggest mysteries. In Chris Dawson's first thorough police interview, he said she'd called him after she vanished, a claim the trial heard was a lie.
Then after the third phone call, she said she knew a lot more times she didn't know she was returning to me.
The interview, played during the trial, was prompted by fresh claims from his second wife a year after they divorced in 1990. Once the Dawsons' underage babysitter, she alleged he had attempted to hire a hitman to kill Ms Dawson in 1981. While the trial wasn't satisfied with her account, Mr Dawson's answers during the 30-year-old interview didn't fill in the gaps.
Where for her, the 2 daughters at that age, extremely out of character.
In early 2018, the podcast The Teacher's Pet put the case front and centre. Just months later, Chris Dawson was arrested and charged. Despite the podcast being downloaded tens of millions of times, the trial heard no one had come forward with information about her whereabouts. 40 years on and a guilty verdict, there are still questions to answer. Rani Hayman, ABC News, Sydney.